Hello and welcome back to Small Things Brought Together. My name is Robin Love. Small Things Brought Together is an ongoing series of conversations with artists and others about their creative process. These are long format conversations, which means that we give ourselves time to circle back, sit in silence, and really dig deep into what is it? What is it that artists do as we are making our work and digging into ideas and feelings and all the other things that come into making art. I am delighted to be closing out our 5th season with artist Portia Munson. Portia is an artist who lives in upstate New York. I was trying to think about how to describe what you do because kind of whatever it takes is what I'm going to say. So sculpture, installation, painting, drawing, films, yeah, whatever it takes. Exploring primarily ideas around gender, feminism, environmentalism, maybe how all that intersects. Yeah, I am so happy to welcome you to Small Things Brought Together. Welcome, Portia.
Thank you, Robin. Thanks so much for inviting me to talk
Yeah.
with you about my work. Appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to dig in. So, yeah, is there anything that you would like people to know about you by way of introduction before we start talking about your work and your creative process?
Um, I think that an important thing about how I work is that I feel like I'm always really influenced by the environment around me. And I live in a natural place in upstate New York, but I also, like everyone, go to stores and throw stuff out and find things. And I feel like that's like a really important part of my whole process. Um, yeah, I'm really interested in this intersection between the natural world and the plastic artificial world, like hitting up against each other. And so I found living in a rural place, walking a stream, living on a country road, like all of those things have influenced my work in terms of like seeing how the man-made world is like pushing up and into the natural world.
Mm.
That's pretty important for me, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I would add that you live with your partner and you've raised a family where you are, and your gardens are artworks in themselves, and I know a lot of it comes from your partner, Jared
Mhm.
Handelson. So
Mhm.
Handelsman, sorry. And
Mhm.
yeah, and in your house too, even is like a giant installation artwork. So yeah. Yeah, well, really, I think you're touching instantly on sort of the big question that I have for you, which is when I look at your work, there's accumulation seems to be a huge part of the process. And I'm really curious, like, well, yeah, like how did that start? And this whole, I mean, we'll look at some of your projects, but there's just seems to be this ongoing accumulation of stuff. I mean, even looking at the work behind you, you know, that yes, you paint and draw, but there's also this found object aspect, this collection, this accumulative process.
Yeah, so I think this piece behind me is I've titled it Her Body. And I think I'm really interested in thinking about kind of who we are individually and collectively through the objects that we, mass produce, consume, throw away, and how it defines us. Yeah, and how it defines us. So the pink has always been a color that I've been drawn to. Um, I've always been attracted to the color and identified with it, and always kind of collected it, but in a small way, starting when I was a kid. And then part of it was the accumulation of it sort of came in like two different ways. One is when I was a student at Cooper Union, I was an 18. I was, broke. I was a student, and I just was picking up and finding any pink things that I would find on the street, and that started to become something. And I was using some of those things as subject matter for paintings, and uh, and then I think that sort of switched. That kind of moved into, well, who am I as defined by these objects, and what does it mean about me to as then a young woman to be associated with these disposable like pink things? Because almost all of the pink things I was finding then, and still now, like 90+% of the things that are made in the color pink are gendered towards girly, girly identifying. And yeah, that just became really interesting. And I just kept on collecting. And then as time went on, that I realized that was also very much an environmental thing, and an environmental question and of importance in terms of like these objects being so disposable and not necessarily single use, but not meant to last long. And then what that said. So yeah. And then it was interesting to me through putting it together and then eventually exhibiting it and having it turn from have it turn from just like working on paintings to actually becoming a piece itself, and how the pink went from being really passive to being much more powerful when it was accumulated and put together. And it was sort of like accumulating and putting this this stuff together. It helped expose meanings, like meanings started coming out of the stuff itself. And so then that's something that I learned from that and have deployed in much of my work, sort of looking at these things that are being, kind of the cast-offs of the culture, or in some cases, not just the cast-offs, like you could say more sort of the kind of collectibles, some of the things of the culture and what it says about like the sort of like almost like unnecessary decorative objects, and how those are often so much connected with women, and then how different meanings about identity and expectations can be embedded in these seemingly harmless objects.
Right, when you see it not just a few times, but like a giant
Mm-hmm.
room-sized piece. Yeah, yeah, you can't. It's
Hmm.
impossible to ignore all these other things that would be easily with one object, just because it's so familiar, to lose a recognition that there's a message in it.
Right, right. Um, yeah, and just when you, and also for me, looking through and gathering, like, for example, blue things. I did a piece a number of years ago at Mass Mocha, and I was invited to do something that looked at blue and pink, like pink and blue, and sort of thinking like boy girl. And that was interesting to do, and I'm really glad I did that. But it became clear to me that uh, pink is really so female associated in our culture now, hasn't always been that way, but it sort of has become that way with the with the growing what would you call that, like throwing out society. The society that like gets stuff and throws it out. And since that started becoming a thing and switched from like 100 years ago where things were more like made to last and people didn't have so much stuff, once things became much more disposable and replaceable, uh like just vast amounts of pink girly stuff that's just like meant to last like a few years and then be thrown out. But with the blue, what was interesting is, yes, blue can definitely be a boy identifier, a male identifier, but it's more complicated than that. It's definitely used as a marketing tool for things like water, and like there are quite a few types of actual disposable plastic water bottles that you can purchase that are tinted a little bit blue, like, or so many things for the beach, or that blue kind of is a symbol of like clean, clear water, although it's represented in plastic. And that it also is a color that is still a very much of a female color. Like it's very much of like the blue bell, or the the Cinderella in the blue dress. Like there's a lot of blue that's very girly too. You can't say the same about pink being for boys, but blue is a more complicated color in terms of its meanings. So I've I've been gathering that color ever since that exhibition at Mass Mocha, and really kind of looking at that and making pieces that kind of talk about that. Um, yeah.
Yeah. And, you've also worked with white
Hmm. Yeah, the
recently.
white.
Yeah.
Yeah, the white is more recent. I think it was maybe 2018 is when I started working with the white objects, and 2018 or 19, and I was doing an exhibition at the Oregon Contemporary in Portland, and it was then called Disjecta. And I had a little residency at a place that's now called Stello, an artist residency in Portland. And the piece at the Oregon Contemporary was called Flood. And it was going to be a whole like blue piece all about water. And I filled this very large space with blue plastic, kind of mimicking water, like flooding a large gallery space or just any space. And that was just thinking about, I mean, now it's just so common, like almost like every month you hear of some flood or some kind of water related disaster somewhere. And so I was collecting things from the local transfer station, but I was also going to local thrift shops and Goodwills, and the Goodwill that is, I'm forgetting what that's called. It's the Goodwill that's the last stop before the landfill. Like everything from the Goodwill goes through this last one where it's like you pay, it's super cheap to get stuff, and it goes in this huge room, and people there going at it, including myself, can almost seem like rats, like going in because it's so cheap. Like you can just like, I think they weigh the shopping carts. It's like a couple of dollars for like a whole shopping cart full of stuff. And then after, whatever's left that the rat people, including me, don't want, goes goes to the landfill. And so going to all those thrift stores and those kind of places, I was noticing all of these white figurines. For some reason, there were a lot of them, and white angels, and I just started gathering them and really thinking about this idea of uh, like sort of prescribed identities, like how objects and what we have around us are instructional, and how even though like in your mother or your grandmother's house, you might have only seen a couple of these, like historic looking female figures that are really pretty in a dress, or an angel candle holder, or a classical figure or something. Like when I started putting them together, it was like, wow, this is like a strong statement for women in terms of, or just even the culture in general, different expectations. They're young, they're white, they were almost all like completely white, just porcelain white, but they were also white in their features, Caucasian in their features. And it just seemed extremely instructional in terms of like, this is what it means to be a woman, and this is what it means to be like beautiful or something. And that just seemed really problematic to me. And so I just started collecting them. And my last show at PPOW Gallery in New York was called Bound Angel. And it was a show that was really all around this theme of these white objects. And it's something I'm continuing to work on and investigate, as well as, like this piece, Her Body Behind Me, is a work in process. And I feel like a lot of my works are like, I have a hard time deciding, oh, this is finished. It's kind of like, or they're part of like these series that just keep on going and going and going.
Which I mean speaks to the sort of endless stream of plastic and other
Yeah.
stuff that gets dumped into our world, Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have a couple questions, but I feel like it would be useful for us to share the screen and look at some of these so people can see what you're talking about. But one thing, maybe to go back to some of the other pieces that are the pink and the blue, and I know you've also worked with green in a more environmental way, but, I think about, plastic to me is literally dead in the sense it comes from fossils. It's, it has just like the quality of deadness to it, and yet there's something about like these objects, like you buy them used, right before maybe they're going into the landfill, but they have been handled, and somebody gave them at least a little bit of life before they got rid of them. And I wonder about like how and then you give them a life and activate them in a way. I want to know if you think about, to me, there's something there around like these mass produced, something that sort of really has like a deadening feeling to it. And yet somehow like what you're doing and then just kind of capturing maybe their history, each object, that in the end, there's like a vibrancy and to the work, but also each object doesn't feel dead anymore somehow. You've also handled it a lot.
Yeah. And I kind of think about not all, but some of my work as being kind of a time capsule, like sort of, because I feel like, if I think about, maybe it would be good to put up an image and then I could just keep on talking on this theme, but like you could put up, yeah, whatever image
Yeah,
you
I had
want.
started here, but we can definitely move to a different. I was going to do one of the bound angels, but if it makes more sense to start
Oh
with.
yeah, maybe we should do one like the flood that I mentioned
Okay,
before,
good.
which is
Here's
it's
here's some of the pink.
yeah.
But let's look at the flood one, yeah.
Under installations.
Yeah, I mean, and also just to say, if someone's interested to poke around your website, I mean, you kind of get a very quick, you can quickly see that, uh, here we go.
Oh yeah.
Oh, so I think,
Where is that? As big as it goes. I don't know. um
yeah, you don't have big pictures on your website, I noticed.
oh yeah, sorry about that. So um yeah, so
But I can
what
scroll.
was I going to say? Oh, I know what I was going to say. I was going to say that I was thinking about what I one thing I think about in relation to the work being like time capsules is the idea that 100 years ago, or more than 100, or just I would say a little more than 100 years ago, when my grandparents were children, there wasn't plastic, and they didn't have plastic tools, and it just didn't exist. And I guess I think like things change so quickly in our world, but for some reason we get really stuck in the world is what it is because it's where we are right now, whereas it's always changing. So I kind of think of these things as time capsules because I like to imagine that 100 years from now or 200 years from now, plastic will be a total thing of the past, and it will be like this thin layer that's covering the earth. So we're like living in the plastic age right now, and it's going to make this layer. But then we're going to, the world in some form is going to end up moving past that. So yeah, that's just something that I like to think about. And I like to just think of like that I'm just kind of reflecting this particular time that we're all living in and sort of making like documenting it in my way. And it's when I was first doing it, like I did a piece called Lawn with Green Plastic in like 25 years ago, and at that time it felt really like it was an important, I felt like I had this really important message to give about plastic. Whereas now, I mean, I think it is an incredibly important message, but it's kind of like, who hasn't heard that like everybody knows like plastic is like kind of horrible, but it's also at the same time like, the predictions of how much is gonna be made and
Yeah,
cast off to the environment is just it's sort of staggering. Like we're just going at it. And it was kind of interesting, just within the past couple of weeks, I saw something in the news about the plastic industries being warned about lawsuits that are going to start coming their way, that will kind of dwarf lawsuits of other, I forget what it was they were comparing it to. Do you remember? Did you see that?
but I can
Anyway,
imagine like smoking or, like
yeah,
because plastic is now, we all have
right,
plastic in our bodies.
exactly. So that's what they were warning. Like it's like those lawsuits from cigarettes or from other horrible things, that asbestos or things like that, like that those are just going to seem like nothing compared to the kinds of horrible impacts and then like, you know, effects that the plastic or petroleum industry is going to face from it. And hopefully that, hopefully they really, hopefully it really had, you know, I don't know. It's like just
Yeah.
slows it down. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like you're touching on some, you know, like the response I have in seeing your work, like say this piece in particular, but many of your pieces is sort of this simultaneous, you know, awe about the beauty of how of what you've assembled here. I mean, some of these colors are just like so saturated and they just like, whoa, they just my
Mhm.
eyes are like, wow. And then it's like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. It's so horrible, you know, like that simultaneous horror and awe of it, which I think
Yeah,
is kind of, yeah, meets the moment actually, you know.
yeah. It's definitely what I experience when I'm putting it together because it is really amazing and kind of beautiful, but also horrible. And I feel like for me, my work it feels successful when it hits that when it's both seductive and repulsive, or you know, like really beautiful and really horrible. Like that I'm sort of always kind of looking for that. And so with this piece, Flood, I've gathered all these like thousands of blue plastic objects, and then I've arranged them in gradients of blue so that it feels kind of more like water, and that it like it has more of a beauty and maybe more of an impact than if it was just all like mixed up and didn't have any kind of order to this chaos. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and there is something about it isn't that you just collected all this stuff and like dumped it on the floor. Like your hand is there organizing and arranging, and I mean that's something too, you know. Like you've actually invested care in these throwaway objects. I guess maybe that's partly what I was sort of alluding to earlier of like,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
know, there's like a care that then that object carries, you know, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
just appear, I
Mm-hmm.
think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, yeah, to me, that's always really interesting how, yeah, this mass-produced thing that was headed for a landfill, you know, now becomes an object of care.
Yeah, and I like to think about the whole concept of ready-mades too, and uh, how so many of the things, because I also do still life paintings of various objects, and I feel like I'm very much sort of a realist in a sense in terms of what I'm like looking at and working with. And it is really all around this idea of like these objects are just astounding, you know, like what's out there, and what I find is like wilder and more fascinating and amazing than anything I could think up, you know. And so I'm kind of just collecting and gathering these things and trying to point something out through the stuff itself.
Hmm. Yeah. 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 Another blue piece. Hmm. I think I want to stick with the color, single color for a moment.
Mhm.
So your pink bedroom project, which you actually showed quite recently at the Museum of Sex in New York,
Mhm.
that was up for a long time.
Yeah, it was up for almost a year.
Yeah. Um, it's great. It got a lot of attention, which is kind of great. Um,
Yeah, it was kind of a perfect place to show that piece in a way, you know, because it was just filled with all this pink girl stuff. And the pink bedroom is made up of, again, like thousands of found pink objects. So the ceiling is all onesies that are all sewn together with the arms hanging down. And then the walls are all covered with pink dresses and lingerie. And it's a full bedroom, like there's a bed in it and a vanity and dressers. And the floor is covered with, well, pink carpet and then just like lots and lots of shoes, lots of pink shoes.
Oh, somehow I missed the shoes. Yeah, I mean, like again, it's sort of like so seductive and kind of beautiful and amazing, and it kind of makes me want to throw up, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's a
Mm-hmm.
little sickening,
Mm-hmm.
actually. I
Yeah.
mean that in a good way.
Yeah. God, I'm so sorry they're so small. That's crazy. I didn't realize that those images
Let me
were
make
going
it
to be
bigger.
that small.
Made it smaller.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that. Oh, that's weird. It actually
I
made
mean,
it.
my dog is crying at the door. Let's get it. There you go.
Well, yeah, maybe actually looking at your Instagram is the image will be a little bit bigger, a little bit maybe. Yeah, this is from that. Oops, that was from
Mhm.
somebody else's repost, but a little bit you can maybe see.
Yeah,
Oh,
this
I
was
can
yeah,
see it.
this was an installation that was done a couple of years before the Museum of Sex at a place called the Flag Art Foundation. This version of the pink bedroom.
Yeah, I mean, so when you have start working on one of these pieces, you're are you thinking you already know where it's going to go, or you're just starting to work because you have all this collected and now you're assembling, and because you've reinstalled several of them in different spaces, and then
Mhm.
you're talking about thousands of objects, and I don't know, what is that process like of installing? And again, like, it's not that your hand touches it once, it's like multiple times, and it gets
Yeah,
packed and unpacked and
yeah, it's true. It's a lot of work putting it up. So the pink bedroom, installing it at the Museum of Sex, a lot of, and also Flood. I like to be given like 10 days, although it can be done in a shorter time, but it's really nice to have the time to really think about it and, you know, uh, sort of play around with it and perfect it. Um, but the pieces, um, the first installations came from, I was, I did a residency at a place called the Fine Arts Work Center on Cape Cod. And that, while I was there, I had, for one of the years we were there for, I think, 4 years, 3 years. And one of the years we rented a house that had lots of bedrooms in it, or several small bedrooms. And you're there during the winter. And yeah, that's a good shot of the pink bedroom. I like that one. Um, and so there were extra bedrooms, and it was gray, cold, long winter. And there's, on Cape Cod, unlike New York, they have swap shops, like free thrift shops at the dump, which I think should be like mandatory everywhere. It's so crazy that that doesn't exist everywhere, that people can't just like bring perfectly good stuff for it to be exchanged. And so, and I also had young children, so I would go like every day, sometimes several times a day, to these swap shops at various local dumps and collect things. And I started decorating the rooms in this house. And that was kind of how the installation started. It was partly from being like a little depressed, and they ended up, I was sort of doing it like finding colorful things. And I had different themes at that point, like and as always, so there was like the pink bedroom and there was the floral bedroom, and collecting everything floral. And then and then when I moved back down to New York, I installed it at my studio down in New York, which is where Fran lives, because I was roommates with Fran and on the Bowery, and made a whole piece called The Garden in that room, and then exhibited it. So kind of like these installations, and I have an idea for another large room installation right now, which I won't really get into, but it kind of starts small. Like there's just a couple of ideas, and then it starts like coming together. And I also was given the opportunity when my son, who's now 30, when he was the first summer of his life, I was given, so he wasn't even one, he was a baby. I was given an opportunity to do an installation at a place called Art Awareness, which was an artist. It doesn't exist in that form right now, but it was a large old hotel up on the mountaintop in the Catskills, in Lexington near Hunter. And it was a big hotel with all these different, bedrooms in the hotel, and they would invite artists to go and do things in these rooms. And so I went and did a pink bedroom up there, and that was the first time and it was like the rooms were somewhat dilapidated, and so you could sort of do whatever you wanted. So I stapled the onesies to the ceiling and the lingerie to the walls, and that was kind of the beginning of that idea. And it was just because I was given this opportunity where I had a room and I could do whatever, like I could staple things to the wall. It wasn't, whereas in the house that we were staying in on Cape Cod, I couldn't do that. I did other sort of, maybe I put up a few nails and like hung things, but I didn't actually like go wild with it. And yeah, I was just talking about this the other day. Like, I don't, for me, maybe other people have this experience, but I don't have the experience of like an idea comes fully formed all at once. That just doesn't happen. It's kind of like an accumulation of small ideas and small, almost like experiments, with materials and stuff, leads to a bigger idea and a more complete, installation or artwork.
I was just also talking sort of about this the other day, actually, and I was thinking about, I was sharing with someone about Agnes Martin in that documentary where she talks about how she sits and waits for the painting to appear, and it shows up and it's like complete little form.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yes, it's very specific. Like it's on the floor and it's like 1/10 of what it will find. And she just literally would sit and wait for it to appear. And then once it did, she would, carry it out. So sort of the opposite of what you just described of,
Right.
starting and then seeing and riffing off of what's coming together, and
Mm-hmm.
which makes sense. The accumulation isn't just what it looks like, it is the process also. That
Mm-hmm.
makes sense to me.
Yeah. So was there another image with this that was a painting with this particular post?
Yeah.
Uh,
One of
yeah.
your
Yeah. So this is a painting called Flower, and
what else is here?
yeah,
There's a bunch. Well, then this was from the Museum of Sex installation, so that's another
yeah.
sculpt.
So these are different pieces that were, and that's another detail of the pink bedroom
Yeah,
of a dresser.
painting,
Mm-hmm.
drawing.
Yeah.
I mean,
So go ahead.
well, I was gonna say, these paintings and drawings in their own way are an accumulation because you've been doing them for, I want to say, like decades. No?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, I definitely start. Oh, there's the ceiling with the all the onesies. Um, I started as a painter, and I think of myself as a painter. And I mean, I'm an artist, but I was a painter first. And I feel like almost all my work you could think of and see too as like paintings with objects. But with my paintings now, I and my drawings, I'm focusing in most of the time on a singular or just a couple of objects, and kind of it's almost like I'm pulling them out of the masses of stuff and then focusing in on them and trying to explain or show something through a singular object. And the drawing that was the previous drawing, or yeah, this drawing, Spice of Life. Um, this is part of an ongoing series of functional women drawings. So I have a whole collection of these objects that are in the form of a woman or part of a woman's body, and have a function. And so I've done over 100 of them, have many more to be done. And I'm currently just about to I put together a book that I'm just about to print of a collection of these drawings. Yeah, because it's just I feel like it's like I'm sort of like again like documenting something, and some of them are, you know, kitschy from they're historic sort of, you know, or and others are like brand new, like in current
Yeah.
popular use. And I also have just finished, or I'm almost finished with a film on the same theme where I'm showing the function of many different functional women objects.
So interesting. I mean, I have to admit, you know, I don't know that I really like again, like what you were saying about like there's all these messages that are just so pervasive that that we don't see them as a message. And, you know, I don't know that I really cottoned on to this thing that's quite bizarre, actually, you know, that we're creating objects using women's bodies, often naked bodies, in this functional way, and that often headless bodies, I would say also.
Yeah.
So they don't have an identity or like a personhood, and that there's, I can't really think off the top of my head how a male body gets used in such a way.
Yeah, there are some
Superhero
examples.
toys, I
There's
guess.
there's some examples, but it's not nearly as prevalent. It's yeah, I don't know why that is. Maybe because it's also like who's the subject and who's being sort of made fun of, or you know, I don't
Well,
know.
whose body do we use as an object? Well, we
Right.
know the answer, right? Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it sounds really like this book will be amazing. So
Yeah.
excited.
It feels like just a sort of collection of those sorts of things. That last painting that you showed of the wig,
Yeah.
that's sort of part of this series. That's the piece that you were seeing behind me. That's part of her body. Like those
Uh-huh.
are these pink objects that are associated with a woman's body.
I do want to talk about these, which you started to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, here's the details. Yeah. So these are these figurine pieces that are mostly white. Yeah.
Yeah. So this particular piece is called Nightstand, and it's made up of all of these found objects that I found. Many of the in this particular piece, many of them are lamps, And yeah, if you go back one, you can see how it is like a nightstand.
I didn't mean to do.
Yeah. Um,
Oops, sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Hold on. I lost myself here. Ah, there we go. Yeah.
yeah, so this piece is called Nightstand, and it's a a table that would go next to a bed, and um, covered with these lights. And I bound these weird objects, many of them. And one of the ways that the binding of the objects started was by a lot of times, if you get like a secondhand lamp, the cord will be wrapped around the lamp. And so that was like a type of binding. And so some of these are presented like that, but then I've like continued with that, with that binding of the objects. And I think the binding is a way of just sort of emphasizing the notion of the constraint in terms of like expectations and expectations and ideas around what it means to be beautiful and a woman, and that are so problematic. And so with the binding, I'm sort of trying to point that out. And again, they are, a lot of them are also kind of beautiful objects. So it's a funny thing also as an artist to feel kind of drawn to them, and then also they're also really kind of awful too. So it's that same sort of dichotomy again.
Yeah, I actually really appreciating that in particular in this moment in time where things are quite polarized and you're either in or you're out, whatever that means, and
Mhm.
and I just so appreciate like things that ask us to hold all of it at the same time because that's actually feels more how things are, you know.
Mhm.
They are beautiful and sort of shiny and some have gold on them and all those things, right?
Mhm.
Ooh, my mom actually made uh lamps for myself and my sister in like a ceramics course where you like poured the mold
Oh
and
yeah.
so I
Wow.
grew up, we had one, each of us had one on our bed. Our
Wow.
nightstand, actually.
Wow. Do you still have it?
I want to say that I do some, because,
Uh-huh.
because she made it.
Right.
I
Right,
can't
right.
believe I would have thrown it out. I have some stuff when I moved out of my house that's in a storage unit that I haven't looked at in a long time. I think if it's anywhere, it's in there.
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, a lot, sometimes some of these things are objects like that, because occasionally I'll find one that I think was one of those things that was um made. And then I actually did this as a kid too. There was a ceramic studio in the town I grew up in, but it wasn't like throwing and making your own ceramics. It was like shelves of forms that had been pre-poured, and then you would choose the one you wanted and you'd paint it,
Yeah.
and they'd fire it. And I definitely sometimes find those, and they'll often have like a little, sometimes they'll be signed, or have a note like for so and so, or
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was a thing.
It was a thing. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, and I'm still very much working on this series, and yeah.
Yeah. Some more. This one, it was like, oh, I don't know that I had noticed before that you bound these two together.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
other layer of,
Yeah, with so many of these things, same with the pink project, it's really interesting to see what kinds of categories objects come in. So with these figurines, they're saints, they're Virgin Marys, they're nude classical figures, or nude kind of contemporary figures, like they're, or Southern Belle types with the big skirts. Like there's sort of I would say just like maybe 6 different categories of types of women. And that's really interesting. And that juxtaposition of the Virgin Marys or saints with them. And then that sort of speaks to the kinds of expectations that are put on women, to be
Right.
how to be proper and virgin like, but also slutty and sexy.
Right? Like all
Yeah,
the, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
Yeah, and the whole like whiteness as purity thing is, you know, has has a lot of problems.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that particular piece that you were just showing was one that I made in preparation for my show Bound Angel at PPOW, and it felt like sort of an important central piece to that exhibition, that particular bound piece, because I bound the mouth and I was bounding the bodies, and it was right when the Roe v. Wade was overturned, and it just sort of felt like, oh yeah, like we're actually not that far from these these kinds of expectations, these kinds of objects. And yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to recall what horrific event happened because I do recall when you had your show, I was like, there was some big horrible thing that happened, but it was Roe v. Wade got overturned.
Yeah.
That made it even more prescient.
Hmm.
This isn't history that you're hearkening back to. This is very much right now. Even
Yeah,
if,
exactly. Which I think felt really, which was kind of intense, because so many of the objects, not all, but the majority of them are, older, like ones I'm gathering from thrift stores and stuff, but it's like current. It's current.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and here you can see a little bit of that blue coming in. In fact,
Mhm.
the lamp that my mom made, it did have like a hint of blue on the skirt. It was one of these Southern Belle kind of things. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's bringing it
Yeah,
back for me.
yeah.
Yeah. Super interesting though. Yeah. And then these are drawings in the background that you were talking about.
Yeah, those are the functional women drawings. And a fair number of those objects, or some of them are on the bound, this bound angel piece, which is it's like a large table, or it could be seen as a large bed, but I was thinking of it as like a really large oval table. I think it's about 14 feet long and maybe 7 feet wide at its widest point. And the tablecloths are wedding dresses.
Oh,
That's what's sort of covering the whole thing. Yeah. And you can see in the first slide, the first image, yes, which you cannot really zoom in on. But anyway, that's the front of the dress, like
uh-huh.
the
Yeah.
arms and the torso of the dress
Yeah,
going
yeah.
down. Yeah.
Wow. Mm, mm.
And then the other thing that was, oh, well, that other piece I was just talking about, with the bound mouth, and along one whole side, the side of the gallery opposite where the functional women drawings are, were a series of trays, which are these,
Here,
they're,
yeah.
yeah, like that. So I did a whole series of these bound bound objects on serving trays, and there's one that's like a candelabra, and those are all glass angels.
Yeah. Wow.
Um,
Huh.
yeah.
I mean, I don't know, I guess I'm also thinking about your own experience of making these, and these are a quite intimate scale in the sense of, I can imagine you're sitting in your studio and there's sort of a beginning, middle, and end to the piece. Whereas some of these other large installations, which you've installed, as you mentioned, a few times in different spaces, in a way they sort of come alive and then go dormant and come alive again in a different way. And yeah, I don't know, is there like, how does that work within your own work process? Are they simultaneously being created, or do you have periods where it's like, no, I think I need to just, even the paintings and the drawings is kind of like keep it, I need to contain it, versus these really giant sprawling.
Um, well, I kind of work on stuff simultaneously. Although like right now I have an idea for another room installation, and I'm sort of imagining like how am I going to do it, because I feel like I need that is going to need its own room to for me to realize it and work on it, and I don't really want it to take over my studio, so I'm kind of in the process of thinking about that, like how am I going to do that? I don't know. Um, but yeah, I like being able to work on and have all different things going on at the same time, because your work can inform your work. Like one part of the work informs another part of the work, and it's also kind of goes around like one's mood too. Like some days you really just want to be, for me, I just want to be sitting and drawing or painting and being in a much more contemplative kind of state. And other days I really want to be like moving stuff around and finding juxtapositions, and so it's my studio's, I would say, quite active. Someone was just in here the other day and they were like, there's a lot to look at. They were like, oh my God, like there's so much to look at and see, not just of my work, but of the materials, of the stuff that I'm working with. And um, yeah, I find that really exciting. And but it's also like it's so, it feels so endless. Like I'll never be able to like make or work with everything that is just in my studio right now. Like it's just like there's so much possible, like paintings, drawings, different ways of these objects coming together. And in a way, what kind of stops and marks things are having the shows. That's kind of when it's like, oh, okay, I'm having a show on this date, so these I guess these things are done. they're, they're going to that.
Yeah, I was thinking about, there's something to being just surrounded by these endless possibilities and potentialities and the stuff of it all, and how that can, it has its own ebb and flow and can sometimes feel totally invigorating and exciting, and sometimes it can be kind of oppressive. Do you ever just want to like clear everything out and have an empty space, or
um Sometimes, I mean, I like having my space really organized and kind of tidy, like that feels important to me. I think if my space felt really chaotic, that would be really hard, but I keep things pretty ordered, so I like that. Although I do occasionally do an artist residency, and that's kind of nice to go, and that's a way of having like a clean slate, like a fresh start, and you just sort of have your raw materials. um but I'm very comfortable with my space and with having a lot of stuff here. I mean, I would say I feel more that way about wanting it all like cleared out in relation to recently I've been feeling overwhelmed by my garden because I have different invasives that have taken over, and I made myself a very big garden, and it's a little overwhelming, like having just so much space and so much in my garden. Um, or sometimes I feel that way with my house, like needing it to be more like emptied out, but not with my studio. It's funny how that is. Um, yeah, but I think that before we finish, I feel like maybe we should just look at a couple paintings and also a couple of the birds or flower pieces. So
Oh yeah, yeah. I didn't know if you wanted to talk
yeah,
about this. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Um, so first I'm going to say like I'm having for anybody in the Catskill, upstate New York area, I am having two-person shows with Jared, my partner, and one of them has a place called the Beatty Powers Place, which is in Catskill, and it's a historic home that puts on just a few shows a year, and they also do like concerts and poetry readings and different things like that. And it's just kind of a really nice, like more local place. And I love showing work in homes. Like I just love how that looks, seeing artists work in historic homes. So that's happening. That's up now and through August, maybe even into September a little bit. And then the other show, and that is going to have of my work, the birds and flower mandala pieces, which we'll see in a minute. And then the show at Opus 40 is a two-person show, and I'm going to be showing the functional women drawings and also a collection of functional women planters with different plants in them on a table, which is relates to the drawings and is also like a scene out of my functional women film. But that's I'm kind of excited to be showing that particular thing. But the paintings, I feel like the paintings have been really a central part of my work, and they continue to be. And I'm excited to be kind of working on paintings right at the moment that I'm really into. And so with the one you're looking at right now, Caught, that the floral background in that is a scarf that that I found the same time that I found the object, which I found when I was doing a residency in Italy at a flea market there, and those things kind of felt like they went together. And what I'm trying to get at are the backgrounds, like that one, or if you go like into another floral one, like yeah, like that one, like I often do these objects paint these objects on these floral backgrounds, and the floral backgrounds are always when my paintings have a floral background, they're either a scarf or usually an article of clothing like a house dress or a skirt or a blouse, an article of a woman's clothing adornment. And when I first did the garden, which we didn't really talk about too much, but that's another whole large installation, room size installation that's all made up of floral dresses and floral objects. I was doing paintings that were going into the room and hanging on the dress that I made. And I would sometimes also just do that in my studio, like put up a dress or a skirt or something and then put the painting on it. And I stopped doing that for some reason, and I pulled the paintings out of that installation. And now, like quite a few years later, I'm coming back around and realizing, oh, that the garments actually add information to the painting. And so I'm starting to put the fabric back.
Oh.
So it was like hang sort of like hang the painting on the dress.
Mm.
So that you're seeing that that meaning or that connection more clearly.
Mhm.
And I'm excited about that. Like, it feels like I'm adding it's like adding meaning or context to the painting, like where it's coming from.
Mhm. Mhm.
And yeah, and so you can see, like, with this particular painting, Bound Hands, this was in the Bound Angel exhibition, and it's sort of taking one of these objects from that exhibition and like pointing it out and focusing in on it. um yeah,
Yeah.
which is what a lot of the paintings do. They're like, connected to other work. Like, if you clicked on one of the pink ones on this row, like yeah, like that one, these pink gloves, like, that's something that is or could be in the pink bedroom, and it's like pulling one of these objects out and looking at it and pointing out um, something else. I like to think that my paintings can get almost like a little more pointedly kind of psychological or metaphoric, and
Mhm.
the installations or the works that I have larger accumulations, they can be there's so much going on that kind of quietness can be lost, in the larger ones. So the paintings are doing, it's like they're doing a different thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that because it feels also like kind of just the way the world is, which is big and overwhelming, and there's just these moments of like focus on one thing, you know. Yeah, and
Mhm.
I also see that these are much more kind of pointed in the sense of like, well, in the sense of even the title, titles, and and certainly within that idea of functional women, yeah, being more
Mhm.
sort of like here.
Mhm.
See? Yeah,
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 definitely.
yeah. Oh, and there's the wig. Yeah.
Yeah, so the wig, what's down below that? That's, oh yeah, so these were all they're all part of this series. These are all gouache. The other ones, I should say, are oil paintings or oil and linen, whereas these are watercolor gouache on paper. And these are part of this series that I'm calling Her Body. And so they're objects that um, relate to a woman's body in one or another. And I also always, my paintings are always painted. I'm painting the objects the size that they actually are.
Uh-huh.
Uh, so these are like, that's a shot glass on the left and a little figurine, like that's the size of a shot glass. And the figurine, it's like I'm just kind of documenting these things, like pulling them out and documenting them.
Yeah, yeah, which also feels in line with the installations where you're not necessarily transforming permanently anything. You're not cutting things up really or painting on them or like you're letting them be what they are. And it's really
Mm-hmm.
like it becomes about the relationship rather than altering what they are. I mean, you're binding them, yes, but
Mm-hmm.
that, theoretically you could take it off if you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I like how that's, yeah, I know, like they speak what they need to say without
Mm-hmm.
too much interference. Yeah. Yeah, and maybe let's go and look at your mandala pieces, which feel very tied into your garden
Mm-hmm.
and that whole aspect of your life, which is a big aspect, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, these are bigger. Those are
Yeah,
big.
that's right. Some of them are really big.
Yeah. So with this work, this series of works are what are going to be shown at the BD Powers Place in Catskill that's currently up. So this work is, I started by making flower mandalas where I was just working with flowers, and that started after someone who I admired and was close to passed away. An older relative, a woman, an aunt who lived to be way into her 90s. And I was just kind of, that is a piece, that is something that just kind of came to me sort of all at once, the flowers. I was walking in my garden and trying to figure out how I was going to express my thoughts and feelings about this person to the family. And this image just kind of came to me, and I collected flowers and just put them on a scanner that I had recently gotten and made a scan of the flowers. And then I just kind of kept working on that. And I was thinking about like how our lives are all so fleeting, and how I was kind of just comparing our lives to the lives of flowers, and how flowers, like start as little buds, and then they like express their beautifulness and completely open, and then they kind of wither and die, and how their life is extremely short compared to ours. But it's there can be like a definite sort of parallel. So I just started making these flower mandalas, and then after a while of making those, I always like would notice, before doing this work, I used to keep a journal of like what animals and when and how many, like on a given drive, like how many squirrels, or how many how many dead things I would see on the road, how many deer. And it just is like astounding how common it is, and how it just is normal, like to just drive by dead creatures. And I'm a fairly empathetic person, and I can see something and it hits me, and I just get like this pain in my body feeling that deadness on the road. And so I started to, when I would see a perfect little bird on the side of the road, I would stop. So, and I know near me there are 2 different wildlife rehabilitation places, and I've definitely brought birds and small creatures to these places that are alive, that I have found on the road. But when they're dead, what I started doing is I take them home and I lay them on the scanner, and then I gather, like if you stop here and you look at this one right here that's called Juvenile, the yellow one,
Mm-hmm.
that one actually was a window strike fatality. And a lot of times people who will find birds and let me know, and they'll give them to me. And so this one I got right the day that it died. And I gathered these things that were in my garden, these sunflowers, tansy flowers, because of a project I had just been doing the day before. I had a whole like collection of pollen, so that ring around this juvenile, I think it's a oh shoot, the name just went out of my head. Anyway, the type of bird, but it's a juvenile of a certain type of bird. And I put this band of pollen around it, and then these flowers. And so I'm kind of almost like an artist scientist, like saying this bird died on this day in this year, and these were the flowers that were blooming or in the garden on the day that it died, like in the area that it lived. So it's kind of like recording its day. And I'm thinking of them as like a memento mori, like instead of just driving past or running over it again, I'm trying to honor it and notice it. So that's kind of what's going on with this work.
Yeah, I mean, it's so like
Mhm.
beautiful,
Mhm.
and yeah,
Mhm.
just Just kind of running through what you have here on your website. So some are these more just like totally flowers, and some have,
Mm-hmm.
oh, and a little squirrel.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm so glad you do this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's my reaction. I'm so glad, but it also feels very like interesting and relate, like it's not a complete departure from the other work in that sense of there's a reverence just in to life. Yeah, in a different way, but the
Yeah,
spirits.
I'm recording, recording what's going on, like what's happening here. But to your earlier question about working on things like, do I do this or that? Like, I actually haven't been doing very much of this work recently because I've just felt really busy and really focused on the work, on my paintings, and on the work that's in my studio. Because this work, I have a setup in my house where I do the scans, and then I send the file off to be printed, or I can print it. But it's a sort of a different kind of work, and I've been doing less of it. Not that I haven't been finding birds, and I can get sort of torn, and it also is kind of the pressure of like what what exhibitions or opportunities do I know are coming up down the road that I need to be working towards. And yeah, it can be like it can be challenging to try to keep up with everything, as I'm sure all
Yes.
the different things that you wanted, how much time you actually have.
Yeah, yeah, and everything keeps dying.
Yeah,
Everything. Yeah,
yeah.
so I'm going to invite people to look at your website and scroll, scroll, scroll because, each one is just so beautiful and
Just go down just slightly, a little bit more, just to where I see the top of the next one there. Oh yeah,
yeah.
that one. Um, I'll just say the last thing, which is that was a piece that I think that show with the yellow dandelion wallpaper, that show was called Reflecting Pool, and there was a large blue reflecting pool in another gallery in the same exhibition. But this one, I made this a dandelion mandala, and then I made it into wallpaper and hung these different bird memento mori on the yellow dandelion wallpaper. And in that case, I was really thinking about um, like herbicides and our sort of pollution and how that affects the broader environment, and how it's like so crazy wanting to eradicate um, dandelions or other things to make like sort of the perfect lawn, and how the trickle down effect can be harming birds, whether it's like making it so that they so that they're like with what DDT did with almost wiping out eagles and other birds because of the eggshells were too weak to survive, or so anyway, this piece that I called Reflecting Pool with the yellow dandelion wallpaper, it was like this gorgeous flower, the dandelion, that's like a sun that's reflecting like the sun back to us, like reflecting life, and has like this very deep taproot that brings nutrients like up to the soil and is so regenerative and important. And how we, for some reason, for golf courses and perfect lawns, like we're trying to kill it, but also are like killing ourselves in a way, killing birds. And anyway, that was, I just thought I felt really, I feel really good about that particular installation. It's a much simpler one than my whole room installations, but I do really love how that worked with that wallpaper and those birds on it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, what is that, Like, oh, here's this beautiful, helpful, nutritious,
Right.
medicinal thing. Let's kill it.
Yeah. Terrific.
God.
Yeah,
What's
crazy.
wrong with us?
Really changed. Crazy.
And And on that note, yeah. Well, thank you, Portia, so much. Just feel like, of course we've scratched the surface and truly with your work because of, there is a way it could be dug into and mined sort of endlessly. That's its power.
Mhm.
But yeah, thank you for sharing it with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was really great to have the opportunity to talk about and share my work. I really appreciate it and think about it. So thanks.